Welcome to This Week in Local, a Locology podcast featuring lively conversations about the local digital ecosystem, hosted by Locology analysts Mike Boland and Charles Laughlin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Local. I'm Mike Boland, joined by my co-host, Charles Laughlin. Hey, Charlie, how's it going?
Going fantastic, Mike. Thanks for asking.
Nice.
How you doing?
I'm well. Excited to hear what you're working on. What are you looking at?
Well, I wrote about this recently. I'm probably going to be doing a follow-up on this, maybe before this episode airs. We'll see. But there's something interesting going on with Meta and their efforts to roll out Meta AI in Europe. This story has been out there for a little bit now, where essentially data privacy regulators across Europe, and particularly the one in Ireland, has kind of put the timeout sign up saying to Meta, you cannot train your AI model, your LLM, on basically all of the user generated content in Instagram and Facebook. And they're sort of crying foul on privacy. Now, a lot of this kind of there's a privacy advocacy group called NYOB, I believe is what it's called, filed a bunch of complaints across Europe about this, and it just kind of brings to light a few things that are sort of ongoing themes, not just around AI, but around sort of big tech's relationship with European regulators, which is not a good one historically. And what we're seeing is that, Meta is doing what you would kind of expect it to do, to use its massive data set of all the posts that everyone posts on Instagram and Facebook as a training set. Of course, they're going to want to do that. And they're claiming that they're doing it legally, et cetera. And they're pushing back hard on this, saying, if we can't do this, we're not, we're going to pick up our ball and go home, essentially. So there's a bit of a standoff between Europe and Facebook on how they can train their data in order to operate Meta AI in Europe. And as of now, it's not going to go there. I think perhaps they'll work something out. I'm not sure on what basis. But it kind of brings to light this notion of, if you want to, go into Europe, your privacy game has to be based on European standards, not on what you think is fair. And see GDPR to get a sense of what European standards are. They're tough. And yep. Meta's running into this. And I think, it's not the most surprising thing, but it also fits into this broader question of what is the data that is available to Microsoft, OpenAI, Meta, whoever it is, Google, whoever it is, to train their LLMs. Because, we recently saw OpenAI do a deal with News Corp. I think it was over 5 years, correct me, for 120 million, something like that. And subsequent to that, there's speculation that news organizations will use these licensing deals with OpenAI not only as a way to sort of protect, the integrity of their IP, but also as a revenue stream.
Yep.
These are not necessarily the most robust businesses, but they have a lot of content, and if they can monetize it in part through licensing deals with OpenAI, also it kind of gets around, you can't just steal our stuff. And it kind of reminds me of when we had Brandon Grosner from Torstar Media at our conference, L24, in April. He sort of said, if you use our content, you got to pay us for it. And that was a little bit of a foreshadowing to things that came subsequent to the conference. So there's a lot going on with, sort of what data is fair game and who's going to stop you. And it looks like regulators, for one. So anyway, Mike, what do you think about all this?
Yeah, interesting. And, you use the term standoff. There's a lot of standoffs happening these days. There's Google and news publishers, not necessarily in the AI sense, but more around just like the ongoing battles of using their links and things in search. They're having a standoff in the state of California. Part of that is Google saying, "Fine, we're taking our ball and going home," just like you said, and let's see what they see them get by without us. They're going to miss us, like it's that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, the one with the perceived power seems to be the one threatening to pick up their ball in most cases.
Yeah. Anyway, it's sort of reminiscent of that, but within the AI realm, it's interesting. This is an ongoing debate too, in terms of like the ethics and the legality around, training data. It's interesting. One thing I learned at our most recent conference, Christian Ward told me that Japan has actually become a sort of hotbed of AI companies because Japan's sort of stance from a legal perspective is it's just a free for all, and their actual stance there is kind of interesting. Like I think it's actually somewhat defensible, because if you think about like everything is derivative. If you think about you're writing an article, you're writing a book, you're writing a research paper, all of the sources you get, all the human mind does the same training that these AI engines are doing. You're getting sources, you're learning, and then you're putting it in your own words and you're writing whatever this thing is. Everything
AI
is
just does it faster.
AI does
much
it faster,
scale.
yeah. And it's not plagiarizing. It is. I mean, plagiarizing is obviously bad in my metaphor. If I were to do that in those writing endeavors,
sure.
If something like ChatGPT or some conversational AI large language model does this, they're getting these sources, they're spinning it up, they're processing it, and the things that they're using it can be analogous to the same thing that humans use when they use sources to create editorial works. Yeah. I'm not saying I necessarily buy that, but I'm saying it's defensible.
Yeah, it's defensible. Well, it sort of presumes that no work is original, that nothing is truly original.
Yeah.
So why are you defending one thing as original when it's sort of the end result of
say
other unoriginal things,
right? Yeah, say there's like there's a lot of sort of music based AI engines that are doing things like spitting out sort of music tracks, and they're based on training, and they got it from like a track, and that artist, should they be compensated? And I think, yes, everyone would agree that that's the case. But you could take the argument a step further and say, well, that person was also majorly influenced by Bruce Springsteen.
Those three chords have been used a million times before.
Yeah. Their influences, Bruce Springsteen, Led Zeppelin, who's ever on that list, do they need to be compensated too? I don't know.
Yeah.
So
well, that gets back to all the times Led Zeppelin has been sued by blues artists. Right?
Yeah. Well, true. So the fact is, you could keep going back and back on the derivative points, and I don't want to sound flip in that, like, it's all derivative, but there is a little bit of that devil's advocate argument in there.
Let's say a model answers a question, and it basically pulls a quote from an original interview that was conducted by the New York Times, and it doesn't source the New York Times.
That's obviously it. Yeah, that's bad, and that
seems to be a clear violation.
That's where you sort of defer to common law, and that's why that's there, or just the country you're operating in. Unfortunately, sometimes a little bit of this stuff is new, but there are equivalents in common law that can be used. And I think the example you just give there is a good one. And that clearly violates something that's already on the books, which is copyright.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. So as long as there's adherence to existing law.
Yep.
But that sort of, not to be too circular here, but that kind of supports the original concept that if you're training on their data, you got to pay them for the data,
But it comes down to a matter of like, if the work was influenced by something, or if it pulls directly from it. And there are...
That's a little bit almost a philosophical conversation about what is real, what is original, like we were saying a moment ago.
Sure, but but as long as it's not directly plagiarized, I think that if something is influenced, and you could argue that that's what a large language model does, and it gets trained and is influenced by the source material, that's the same thing humans do.
Okay. Then I guess where's the line between training and then just purely just like grabbing?
Yeah, and I don't mean to make it sound simplistic. It is certainly that line. That line is going to be very complicated to pinpoint, but yes.
And it's going to be hard to just like slicing a piece of cheese. It's not that easy, right?
Yeah.
There's not like hard lines, and it's going to be all over the place. I'm not sure how you manage that.
Yeah.
But anyway, it'd be interesting to see if Christian's right, and we'll start to see OpenAI,
and I don't want to put words in his mouth. He was reporting on
domiciling in Japan. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't want to put words in his mouth in terms of his value judgments on any of this. He was simply reporting that because of Japan's lax position,
fair enough.
A lot of companies
He wasn't saying, yay, Japan.
I actually don't know his stance and wouldn't feel right, characterizing how he feels about that.
Fair enough.
Everything I just said is my opinion. But he got that he inspired those thoughts by the fact that, Japan is taking a rather laissez-faire attitude on letting companies do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kind of back to the original point. It's going to be interesting to see if like the whole European privacy there's a bit of a European, let's protect our assets, are sort of native players, most of whom are sort of, minuscule compared to the global big tech, which is mostly US based or US origin.
Yeah, they're doing what they should be doing, is protecting their constituents, which are European companies.
Yeah, that was what they were doing sort of in their fight against Google and search on search and all that. But it seems like they're taking that same mentality and that same approach to AI training. Let's protect but in this case, they're trying to protect individual consumers, in Europe.
Well, they're very consumer friendly too. The EU is extremely consumer protective.
This is more of a let's protect consumers instead of let's protect newspapers, for example.
Yep.
Or let's protect, German-based travel sites that are being depreferenced by Google or whatever.
There could be a little bit of like Google is based in California and our travel site is based here, so who they're going to fight for.
That is they were almost explicit about that. This is different only in the sense that they're sort of we're protecting the little guy, the consumer, but I'm not sure. I guess the question I have is, do consumers care if, their Facebook post about God only knows, the British elections is being used to train an AI model?
Well, really what it is like, you could say that the EU is sort of like the mafia. I mean, they take their tariffs, they take their VAT tax, and they're like, they provide protection and security to all these companies.
Yeah. It would be a shame if something happened to your
exactly
to your large language model or whatever it is. Yeah. Any rate, Mike, why don't we just end it there, and why don't you read us out?
Sure. So thanks, everyone, for listening. This has been This Week in Local. Stay tuned every week for more episodes. You can find the show on all major podcast networks and find out more at locology.com. Please subscribe, like, and comment. Your engagement helps others find us. And if you're interested in being a guest or sponsor, you can email us at podcast@locology.com. So I'm Mike Boland with Charles Laughlin. Our producer is Dara Sweat. So thanks for listening, and see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Locology's This Week in Local with Mike Boland and Charles Laughlin. Be sure to subscribe for more.